You're 7 today. You're a man now. Bury your first toy and the portrait of your mother while I play the flute. I'm Eddie Webb, and today we're going to watch this fucking thing called El Topo.
Setting the tone.
Welcome to Genreless, and today we're going to go into the world of Mexican cinema. Well, especially we're going to the world of Alejandro Jodorowsky, which is a whole different thing, honestly.
I have so many wonderful thoughts, and there are a lot of movies and TV shows I put before Eddie, and some of them are like masterpieces. Some of them are just funny. And when we started this Western run, I said there was one movie I can't wait for Eddie to see. And I didn't say it with my usual Chris jovialness. I said it with an evil spark in my eye and devilishness in my heart.
Right. And it's this.
And we're finally here.
Yes. So for clarification, Alejandro is not actually Mexican. He is Chilean and French, but he filmed all of this in Mexico, and the dialogue is in Spanish. Although hilariously, Mexico did not ever want it shown there, which sets a tone for this movie, I think. And honestly,
his career.
Right. So this is one of those movies where I had to research, and it's a bit weird to research. El Topo was Mexico's entries for Best Foreign Language Film to 44th Academy Awards, but was not selected, right? It was not actually allowed to be shown in Mexico at all. In America, they got distribution rights for the film in after 1970, but it was only legally allowed to be shown at midnight because it was not legally rated. Because if it had been rated, because as I understand it, the X rating system did not actually exist in 1970, so they couldn't actually rate it, which means it could not legally be shown in theaters except for at midnight.
It's similar to how they would have like porn theaters back in the 70s where you could roll up into.
Right, exactly. It was licensed exactly like pornography, but it was shown primarily at art houses, and it gained a lot of notoriety, is probably the best way to put it. But in the middle of all of this, his distribution partner in America, he and Jodorowsky got into a huge fight. And so for decades, the only way you could see it was through a partially censored Japanese Laserdisc, or traded with fan subtitles, much like anime was slightly later after this, So it is in the same ecosystem as the dodgy anime tapes that Chris and I remember from our younger days, which is wild to me. It actually came out officially on DVD in 2007. So there was no official English language release for El Topo for 37 years.
Oh, I don't know how much of the back history you're going into, because Eddie has notes. I have not looked at his notes. And I did like no research because, I watched El Topo for Haunted West. It's the only reason I ever watched this movie, because for Haunted West, I watched a whole bunch of different types of Westerns and some other movies that were Western adjacent to be able to try to encapsulate how I want to tell that story. Right. And El Topo is the reason for like acid movies, essentially, because like a journalist used the term acid Western to describe El Topo. Right. But it's not a movie that I was going to watch again until we decided to do this. And I thought, there is no way I cannot have us watch El Topo. I thought really hard about it because I knew that it was gonna strain Eddie's faith in me showing him things.
Right. So, you're right in the sense as I understand it. A lot of times we talk about genre is something that gets kind of discovered backwards. Very rarely um, is a genre so clearly defines before it moves forward. Cyberpunk's actually a weird exception in that regard because cyberpunk was coined pretty quickly after people could identify a collection of writers who were in correspondence with each other um, uh, to be able to do that. Usually, when you have a genre, there's a surname like Lovecraftian, for example. Um, so acid fantasy, or sorry, acid western is one of the. You're right. It was someone had to call this thing something, so they called it acid western, and a genre title was born.
I
And
think the most popular acid western or modern day version of it is going to be the Dead Man from the 90s, I think, with Johnny Depp.
okay,
Because
right,
I think a reviewer got into that and they got into more detail about what the acid western genre is.
right. So not knowing much about the nuances of acid westerns, um, I will say this movie does very clearly fall into surrealism, and so I will try to approach it from that perspective, with a whole lot of caveats. I'll go back to background the story of the movie in a minute, but that's just a good point to kind of talk about. Um, with surreal films in particular, a plot summary just isn't always adequate to explain what is actually happening, right? Because
What?
it's a bunch of images. And so as I was starting to compile my notes, I realized very quickly I had one of two options, which is do a relatively sparse plot summary as we go through, and we'll just talk a lot about the things that are not related to plot, or effectively novelize the film to write down absolutely everything that was happening. I went with A because I value my life too much.
And see, this is the intrinsic difference between us, my friend, and why you are covering this movie and not me, because I would have went for B.
Right, right. See,
Painstaking notes. Like,
I love myself too much. I will
and
probably
then
have
he
forgotten
turned,
stuff. But,
and then he did this, and then this happened, and then that happened.
right, and then he was covered
4
in
hours
bees.
later.
Um, so
Wait, wait,
also as a
wait.
note, go ahead.
Before you jump into where you're going to go, can we take a step back and talk about the production of this film?
That's what I'm gonna do.
And
Actually, yeah, yeah.
okay, cool.
I was about to jump to that. Well, actually, before I jump to that, just real quick, I was gonna say like because of the weird distribution of this movie, it is unclear what a full version of this movie actually is. For example, I sourced a bootleg version of it because that was the only way I could really get it. I handled it easily, and it was 119 minutes long. But according to the British Film Institute, it's 124 minutes long. So there are lots of rumors of various minor cuts that have been made to the movie, depending on what you. And it seems like a lot of them are based around a specific scene of sexual assault. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if that's the movie version I watched or not. So my comments may be making assertions that are addressed by the missing 5 minutes of film. I don't know. And it's one of those films where that 5 minutes may genuinely be a very different thing. It's because it's a bunch of stuff. Um, but there is a lot of uncomfortable imagery in this film, right?
Since
Uh, yeah.
since you brought up that scene, I think we should talk about that now
Okay.
because we're on that point.
Okay.
Um, what I didn't know until this, and because I listened to like an interview with Jodorowsky the other day when I was going through some work stuff. So he, I hate him. And originally after the film came out, he alleged, I think is the best legal way to refer to it, alleged that he sexually assaulted the woman in real life and not just
Yes.
like part of the film.
Yep.
And
Mhm.
then has come back later and said that's not what he did. He was just trying to hype and get promotion for the film.
Right. And most of the time, I would say that's just a bullshit argument. And I'm still 80% convinced it's a bullshit argument. But given the subculture he's pitching his movie towards, that kind of outrage probably would have actually gotten eyes on the film. So it's not
Mhm.
entirely implausible. It's largely implausible, but not entirely implausible.
So, and I know that I think there was a 2020 or 2019 retrospective, I think, of his work that was supposed to be done and got canceled because of it when more of that came out, information about it. And I'm not sure when he went back and said that he didn't do something. I don't know the exact dates or years for it, but
it was right around when Me Too started, so it would have been around that time period. So yeah, so kind of jumping ahead a little bit. Another reason why it kind of got popularity is that in 2007, DVD came out, Blu-ray came out in 2011, and since then, a lot of very notable people have mentioned it as an influence. Shocking no one, David Lynch is one of them, right? Watch the movie for 5 seconds, you go, "Oh yeah, if David Lynch had watched this film, I would have told him to watch this film." Right? It's very clear something he would look at and go, "Yes, I get that." But also, like video game writer and director Goichi Suda, who's done a lot of very surreal games. So again, not a huge surprise. Um, Peter Fonda, Dennis Hopper, The Mighty Boosh, Patton Oswalt, Bob Dylan, Marilyn Manson, Frank Ocean, of all people. So like John Lennon, a lot of people, a lot of artistic people had looked at and said this was a huge or some percentage of influence on me or inspirational to me.
so the reason the movie also got its production deal from like in 71, I think, is because John Lennon and Yoko Ono went and saw it and loved the movie.
Right.
This could be urban legend, but and then hyped it, and he told, I think it was like his manager or someone, to give Alejandro like $1 million next to make whatever he wants to make. And so that's where his next movie, that we will probably not cover because I think we're done with Alejandro,
Right.
the Holy Mountain came from. Some people consider it his masterpiece. I have never seen the Holy Mountain. I will admit it now. I haven't seen it. I saw El Topo and I was like, I'm done. I'm curious what your Dune would have been like, all like 20 hours of it, but I would
Right.
not have watched it.
Right. Um, to give you some context of where he was at financially as a filmmaker during this, before he got fame is a loaded term here, but became more entrenched into actual regular filmmaking as opposed to this very indie film. It was over the course of nearly 3 years. So the film was not made in 1970. The film was actually started production in 64. Um, and it wasn't completed until 1968. And then because of the distribution problems, it never actually got into theaters in 1970. So we're actually looking at a film that makes more sense in the 60s than in the early 70s in a way. So that's one piece. Another is part of the reason why it took so long is because the filmmakers ran out of money and supplies twice during it, literally stranding themselves in the middle of Mexico both times. So like they were just ran out of money, had nowhere to go, and had to scrape and find money to keep the movie going, which really explains a certain part of the film later that we'll get to.
So, Eddie, where did they get the rest of the funds to make this movie happen from?
That I do not know. I've not been able to. Apparently, either they've been quiet on it, or my research has not told me.
So, from my understanding, and once again, I say this could all be hearsay, is that I think they had made some deals with, I don't want to call them, well, they probably wouldn't call them mafia there, but with some underworld types to get some additional funding.
Mm-hmm.
Much how people that were making Bubblegum Crisis went and made some deals with underground people to get some extra money to finish their thing.
Right. I will say, I'm on the cusp of researching this for an unrelated project, but um, my initial research is that Mexico in the late 60s, early 70s is actually a pretty wild place. There is a whole subgenre of 70s Mexican noir that I'm about to dive into because apparently some of the books are getting English translations and are coming over here relatively recently. But this is like, you know, as I understand it, it's either during or just after one of the revolutions. So like it's 50% Mexico City's 50% crime ridden, 50% police state. kind of situation.
Mm.
So them having to go to underworld types to get money is not entirely a surprise based on what extremely limited research I've done. Like I said, I've just started to dip my toe into this area of history. So it was funny that it just came up and it's like, oh, it's a Mexican film. Oh, it's about the right time period. Huh. Okay.
And so journalists did not really love this movie, from my understanding.
No.
So much so that God, one newspaper had to retract their own article because John Lennon and Yoko Ono loved it so much that there was pressure upon the paper, and the paper went, you know what, you're right, we were wrong. It is in fact like a spectacular film or something, and then called it a day. That
Right.
is how much
Right.
power and influence Lennon had. Tim.
Right. Which brings up a larger conversation of how subjective art is, right? Like, everywhere I have read, lots of people have praised this movie, but there are also people who are very heavily entrenched in high profile, high power artistic communities, right? How much of the perspective of this movie is based on people with influence saying it is good, and how much of this is movie objectively good? Because I'm going to tip my hand slightly here. I do not agree with many of these critics on their assertions about this movie.
The thing is, or that goes for everything.
Right.
Like, essentially, any influencer can state something, and if they have enough influence, everyone agrees with them, regardless of the quality of whatever said thing is.
Right. It
John
is
Lennon, ultimate
nice when
influencer.
right. Well, I mean, fair. Like that's the only difference between influencers now and people with influence then is that there's less startup needed to become an influencer now. You can aggressively carve that out as opposed to having to build area in a different part of society before you can start having influence. So yeah, I completely agree with that. And also, uh, the being a surreal film already slides it very heavily towards the quote unquote art film area of heavy on imagery, light on explanation. Um, and I will say these kinds of artistic experiences I always struggle against, partially for and this is my personal background, because of where I grew up, which is a very blue collar area, and the kind of people I grew up with. Um, there were a lot of people who I was trying to engage with artistically, who very much felt like because if you didn't go to a school and have a certain amount of schooling, or if you didn't have a certain amount of education and you didn't quote unquote get it, that you were stupid for not understanding it. Only smart people understood these kinds of movies. And so I have always had a strong reaction to surrealism specifically, but this kind of quote unquote art media for a long time because either I had to get it or I was stupid. You weren't allowed to not like it and not be unintelligent. And so I've always had strong reactions to it. It wasn't until I realized that, and I made a joke about it on the podcast, where Transformers movie is also a surrealist movie. And I could very much argue Transformers movie using the exact same language that people would argue for a movie like El Topo. Realized, oh, this is all bullshit and it doesn't really matter.
Ah, love it. That's one of the reasons we get along so well, I think. So yeah, all right. You've talked a little bit about this movie, Eddie, but I want to know more about the man, the legacy, the messiah, the misogynist, the creator himself, who is a writer, director, actor, forced child labor person, Alejandro.
Yes, because in case I may have undersold this a little bit, Alejandro Jodorowsky is the director, he is the writer, and he stars in his movies. So it is very much. Usually, we try to give some caveat of like the creative team or whatever. No, this is all Alejandro's show. Functionally, yes, he had other people worked with on it, but this is very much an auteur-driven product in a lot of ways. Um, and so basically, I've only done minimal research on this guy. But he dropped out of college, so I have that respect for him. He is not an academic in that regard. Um, he was a mime for a chunk of his career. So
I love that. I'm sorry, that's just like awesome.
but he doesn't, and he moved to Paris. So, to do even more traditional mime, right? So he was like hardcore into being a mime in the 40s, which is early 50s too, which is like wild, right? Um, and then he got involved in silent film. He really enjoyed that, and so he started dividing his time between Mexico City and Paris. And again, around this time, Mexico City was hot, spicy, put it that way. Yeah, no, I said that and I realized I regret saying that. But he co-founded the Panic movement, which was also a surrealist performance art group. So him doing a surrealist film is not a huge stretch. He was between the mime leading to surrealism is a fairly well known trajectory, right? So that's not a huge surprise. This is very much in his artistic DNA.
That seems pretty blah. If that's like your known trajectory, I feel that if it's known that you go from mime to surrealist, I feel there should be a different journey associated with becoming a surrealist. Something that is more.
Well, I mean, let me phrase that. There are other ways you can get there, but at this time period, the people who were involved in traditional mime, the Venn diagram people who were involved in early surrealism is pretty heavy overlap, is what I'm trying to say. So it's not like it's the view to mime. Well, eventually you become a surrealist filmmaker and film rape scenes. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there's a lot of that community to talk to each other on both sides.
Okay.
So El Hobo is not actually the first film he directed. He did direct one film previously, Fando y Lis, which was banned in Mexico. So he probably wasn't surprised when El Topo was also shadow banned in Mexico.
Well, that's because, all right. So what's the premise of his first movie, Eddie?
I actually don't know.
So it is. It's a post-apocalyptic love story of a guy and his paraplegic girlfriend.
We're gonna get there. we're gonna. I have a lot to say about that when we get there.
And so, since that film was banned and everything else, he decided he would make a Western because everyone would come to see a Western.
That makes a lot of sense. And then, yes, as you mentioned, he got a lot of money from John Lennon. Specifically, he got a lot of money from Alan Klein, who was the Beatles manager for Holy Mountain. They didn't go anywhere. He was briefly associated with filming Dune, as we talked about quite a few times, actually. Then I know him more from his comic book work, because he most notably pens the Incal, but he is a common collaborator with a very well-respected French artist called Mobius. He's known only as Mobius. And the Incal led to a lot of sequels and spin-offs, Technopriest, the Metabear, and so whatnot. So it's like a whole Incalverse. And again, very surreal, very bizarre, very weird, lots of naked women, lots of references to new age pop culture, Alchemy to 10-0, that kind of stuff. I'm trying to avoid using shamanism because it is a word that is very clearly being co-opted and taken from a different group to be badly misapplied to Western pop culture bullshit. But that is how he would have phrased it.
So, Eddie, then I'm curious, have you read The Sons of El Topo?
I've not read it, partially because I don't think it's been translated to English. But yes, he did do a comic book sequel, 3 volumes of now. 3 volumes, it sounds a long time, but you have to understand, Franco-Belgian comics, their volumes are like usually 50, 60 pages long. So we're not talking like a trade paperback. We're not talking usually. So like the 3 volumes was like, comes out to about one slightly bigger trade paperback trade comic book that we'd usually see. So like, it's not that many pages, but still, yeah, he did 3 large issues functionally of a sequel to this movie, because this movie needed a sequel.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I'm sorry
had
if
a
I'm
very
laughing more than
strange
usual.
career. No, he's
the
had
look
a
on
very
Eddie's
bizarre
face.
career.
The look on your face going through this, it's pained and yet there's something else there I can't quite put my finger on yet.
So look,
And I shouldn't be so happy, but I am, my friend. I can't help
so like I came into this really wanting to give this movie a chance, partially because um while none of the movies we watched have been good, I have enjoyed them on some level, right? And also, as I said, like I've read the Incal and I kind of like it. And I'm trying to get into surrealism more, right? So it's like, okay, I really want to appreciate this. And like everything I had heard about the movie was like, it's kind of, fought to get distribution and it was traded on tapes illegally for decades. Like everything about it is like, okay, I feel like something I should probably, if not enjoy, at least appreciate. We'll see what happens.
Well, the thing is, like, I think it was the financial fallout between Alejandro and the Beatles manager, and the Beatles manager owned the rights to the stuff, so that's why he got rid of it. So essentially, by him trying to take revenge on Alejandro, instead made him into like a underground sensation.
Right. And there's a certain amount of Alan Moore-ness, I guess you can call it, of like being screwed over by major media corporations and developing a reputation and a appreciation by an audience who, for at least part of the reason they like it, is because they have been screwed over by major companies or
Yeah,
major groups.
and I think the crux of their argument, if I remember right, came down to he wanted Alejandro to make like it was a French porn book called like the story of O or something, and Alejandro
Okay.
wouldn't make it or some such nonsense. So they fought over that. They became money. And then he had another movie that he wanted to make, I think, where he had Ringo Starr as the protagonist, but Ringo didn't want to shoot a scene, and then that cost money and spiraled out of everything.
Right. Yeah, because again, a bit like Alan Moore, Alejandro clearly is very much a person with singular vision. And I
Yeah.
mean, let's actually, a lot of parallels David Lynch too, right? Very eclectic auteur director. Um, the difference being is, you could correct me if I'm wrong. This David Lynch seems a little more inclined to work with others, even if he has no tolerance for their shenanigans. He doesn't
Yes.
mind collaboration as long as as long as they're on the same page. Whereas Alejandro seems like he's very much, with the exception of Mobius, seems like he's very reluctant to collaborate.
I feel that Alejandro has a page and he wants to share a sentence with you. Well, Lynch want you to help him write the page. And then once you've written it, he'll reread it and may change half of it.
Right.
But
Yes.
your half gets to stay there though. So you're still working together. And people
Right.
love working with David Lynch. Like actors come back to work with him because he
Right.
gives them something that I guess something that process sparks in them. I don't think Alejandro has that though. So like
No,
that's
I think he is much more, like you said. You have to do it my way or no way, and also may change his mind halfway through. Whereas you're right, everything I've heard about David Lynch is he likes to build on people. It's like, okay, let me take the idea and here's how I would add to it to get it closer to where I'm going, rather than saying no, you have to be over here. It's like, okay, let's both work towards moving over there.
yeah.
And I would even argue, based on when we watched the return, Twin Peaks: The Return, that when Lynch gets a little too much control over something, he struggles a bit. I think he needs someone to kind of push against it, and he likes it when that person is the right balance of push against him but still giving him space.
Yep.
If they push too hard, like with Dune, he struggles, and when they don't push enough, like with Showtime, I think he also struggles a bit.
And what I liked, well, no, one of the things I love about Lynch is that he's willing to walk away from whatever it is. Like that is an amount of power that I cannot express to people how important it is and how much it lets you control the conversations you're in.
Right. I just reminded me. I just double checked. Alejandro is still alive. He's 96, and Jodorowsky is still alive. Amazing! Wow.
I think I read somewhere where he claims that he's going to live to be 120.
If he can pull it off, good on him. Okay, we've been dodging around it long enough. You ready to talk about this movie?
Well, wait, Eddie. Is this the movie that made the Midnight Movie?
I don't know. It seems like it would, because timing wise, I can see how people watching this movie would have evolved into the people who watched Rocky Horror, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like there is a connection there, but I don't know if this is the movie that was like, yes, this is what made midnight showings more of a sensation in the 70s. Probably, if not the first one, it probably was one of the early ways. I don't think midnight showings weren't really a thing before 1970. I don't think.
Okay. Because that wasn't something I was never really sure about. I think it was, but I'm not sure. And that's one of the things where it sort of becomes a retroactive thing about what midnight movies become. Oh, wow. Well,
Right, because there's a without going down the rabbit because this is another rabbit hole real quick, like, there's a distinctly American, area around this time period because it's not quite to when cheap movies are normalized on television, but theaters could get cheap movies in at late times so that they could appeal to a very specific niche audience without losing too much money. And so the appreciation of the B movie, the cheap pop culture film that not anybody likes, like like enjoying like a um, uh, Italian westerns or Italian horror movies, as an example, around this time period. They were cheap, easy to import. Theaters didn't pay a ton to show them, and so they could show them at midnights, skirting the laws, and people felt like the counterculture thrill of watching them. But like the idea of cult and cheap kind of conflates here, um, in a similar way that when we talked about Doctor Who, that's kind of happening at the BBC in a slightly different way, right? But again, Doctor Who was a cult, and so it was a different perspective. But the U.S. was much more of a, like you said, underground thing because it was something I knew. And then eventually, Hong Kong films, Italian films, Mexican films started getting cheaply localized for U.S. And syndication realized that they could show these things in dead zones very cheaply, and so that's when a much wider appreciation of quote unquote bad films started happening. But you're right. As I understand, this midnight showing thing is kind of the start of that trend from uh, movies are something that you are a big budget thing you go watch, and then the cheap films are something you just pad out the day, to the cheap films being a pleasure in and of itself.
so what's it say about me if one of the first midnight movies I saw, like in my first ones, was Fellowship of the Ring? So what's it say about me then?
Well, like the original Fellowship of the Ring, or
Yeah, like
like
opening night in
like
Alabama,
like the one that
they
was made in
had
Russia in the 90s.
God no, the one by Peter Jackson. Um, Opening night in Alabama, that was like their midnight movie.
See, that's different because now midnight movies are very much a nerd thing, and that's also pop culture now. So that's a separate thing, right? Midnight showings now are a very different place than they were before.
I'd call John Lennon a nerd, but we could get into this movie if you want because
Sure,
I'm
sure.
just like dancing around now to lynch it up a little bit.
Okay. Uh, El Topo is traveling through a desert on horseback with his naked young son, Hijum. After they come across a town whose people, horses, and livestock have been slaughtered, El Topo has his son shoot a dying man before he hunts down and kills the perpetrators and their leader, a fat balding colonel. El Topo abandons his son to the monks of the settlement's mission, choosing instead to ride off with the woman whom the colonel has kept as a slave. So there's that.
That's like 30 minutes, man.
It really is. Like, you're not exaggerating. It really is 30 minutes. But also, again, talking about movies can be hard in some respects. Um, the plot gets more relevance later in the movie. Like the movie actually starts having a plot after the first half an hour. So this first half hour is just images, frankly. So yeah, that covers a lot of the movie, but a lot of the movie at this point in time is just, here's a showdown where we draw our guns after a squeaky balloon finally deflates. You know, here's a bandit shoving a woman's shoe in his mouth before he gets shot. It's just stuff that happens. Like a naked boy burying a toy and a picture of his mother in the desert while his father plays a flute. 1 minute in, like that was like the first line of the movie, and it just sets a whole tone for this whole film.
So when I watched this movie the other day, Eddie'd already started it before I had.
Right.
Shocking no one listening to us. And so the little umbrella popping over the desert, I took a picture of it and I sent it to Eddie to show him that I'd started the movie to get his response. Because earlier, last week, actually. I got a text from Eddie. It shows how far in advance he does this.
Right.
Saying essentially, what the fuck?
I believe my line was, "What the actual fuck is this movie?"
But the striking visual of like him on the horse at a distance with a little umbrella coming over the horizon is a beautiful shot. I'm going to talk about some of the cinematography because
sure,
the cinematography of this, while there's a budget, is reminiscent of other films, like other old school classic westerns. And I say classic, I mean like 50s, by like The Searchers and things like that, how Ford captures the landscape and everything else. That is something he's trying to emulate here.
right.
And so that's there.
Now, in a weird bit of synchronicity, because I've double checked the timings, and I do not think one could have influenced the other. I think it's just a weird coincidence. But in late 1970, a very influential manga had started, which involves a father and his naked son traveling through barren locations as they try to figure out their lives, and that's Lone Wolf and Cub. And so there's a very strong parallel to the first part of this movie and Lone Wolf and Cub, down to individual shots and panels are pretty similar. There's no actual desert in Lone Wolf and Cub, but like how they frame things reminds me a lot of that manga. But again, I double checked to check myself, and like the manga was serialized September 1970, and this movie came out mid 1970. And there just wasn't enough time for one to influence the other. I think it's just something in there.
If you're saying this movie was in production for 5 years, there's a chance this could have influenced the manga.
Maybe, but it was in Mexico. It was shot in Mexico, and the
but it was shot in Mexico with an eye toward U.S. distribution. So,
right,
I'm not saying there isn't because I have no idea. Because this is fascinating now, but I'm just thinking there is enough years overlap that there could have 15% chance.
It's possible, but like Kazuo Koike and Joseki Kojima were both very into traditional Japanese, or sorry, samurai films. So like their inspiration was Kurosawa films, right? But as we talked about, there's this weird Ouroboros of Westerns influenced Kurosawa, which influenced samurai films, which influenced Westerns.
Yeah.
And so there's also a line of Jodorowsky, who is a comic book writer, doing this stuff, and then later comic book writers like Frank Miller being heavily inspired by Lone Wolf and Cub. So the overlap trickled down from these two pieces of media. It gets very, very overlapping very quickly. But like at this exact moment, it's not impossible, but pretty unlikely that the creators were aware of each other.
Interesting. Now in my mind's eye, they were.
Right. But again, like also Lone Wolf and Cub wasn't surreal. It was much more if we're using this movie to talk about taking the parts of the Western apart and looking at them atomically, that was going much more of the not silence, but soft talking, man a few words, who goes into communities and solves problems and occasionally takes shortcuts for moral reasons. That's much more Lone Wolf and Cub. Lone Wolf and Cub is a very long revenge story, right? El Topo is much more about, like I said, imagery. Let's take the imagery of the West and then talk about other things using that imagery. So after this first 5 minutes of the movie, they go in very different directions. But this first 5 minutes of the movie, you can see how the samurai Western overlap touches actually quite strongly.
And all right, I guess we got to talk about it. But this is his actual son, by the way.
Okay,
that he has on screen.
Weirdly makes things slightly less creepy, but still.
Yeah, but yeah. So, all right, I said I watched this movie once. I'd forgotten a lot of El Topo. All right, let me rephrase that. I don't forget movies. I think I actively expunged a bunch of El Topo from my mind.
I can see that.
No big spoiler. I did not love this movie, and I still don't love this movie. But it's a movie that we had to discuss and talk about. I don't think there's any way we could not have talked about it if we're touching on the Western genre.
Sure, and like, okay, so and this movie oscillates weirdly between just random surreal stuff. Like at the very beginning, the movie explains that El Topo means the mole, and so it gives you a 1 minute documentary on moles, which the movie never explains. Although much later in the film, you kind of see a connection, but at this point in time, it's just a guy called the mole, and here's about moles, and it's like very much like there's a voiceover and there's still images, but it's all done like weird and askew. So like it's very much what if you're watching a nature documentary on acid, right? Kind of look. But then when they go into the village to confront the people of the village, there's a literal river of blood going through the village, right? And so the imagery becomes like super on the nose and obvious.
Which is where we shift types of westerns. So we go from like the old classic John Ford westerns to spaghetti westerns with Leone,
Right.
when we get to like sheer amount of gore and squibs and just like red paint everywhere, like red paint on you, red paint on you.
Right.
Over the
No,
top.
totally. From the violence perspective, I definitely did get a lot of uh, not Leone, but the other Sergio. You know, there was very much a lot of Django vibes in regards of the visuals of this movie.
And it is the reason I stick somewhat with Leone is because he has like that Man in Black Clint Eastwood vibe when he comes in.
True.
Because Django is a little loquacious, but Clint Eastwood's like is essentially like a silent protagonist, and to most of the time he is pretty quiet, or he says a few words and then that's it. And none of them are usually charismatic when spoken.
At this stage, El Topo, yes, is kind of somewhere between those two extremes. Yeah. And we should mention, aside from being a surreal film, also this movie is kind of arbitrarily broken up into sections. I'm not following those sections because sometimes the sections are right in the middle of a plot line and sometimes they're not. But the movie does change what it's about pretty rapidly. This is kind of three smaller films crammed together in one in some respects.
It's essentially Alejandro decided to put everything on screen that he had. And I mean, everything. Like,
Yeah.
this is, to some extent, for my understanding, this is a personal movie for him. Like, one of the things is there's scenes of when he's running with his son on his back. There's in an interview, he said that the only time his father had like ever touched him is when his father had to carry him on his back after their car broke down. So that's like a very personal thing for him that he wanted to integrate into his movie. So that's why there's a lot of scenes with people being carried on other people's backs.
Sure, and now that you say that, I can understand a bit more why El Topo finds a woman and immediately pushes his son away, literally, like uses his foot to shove his son away into the arms of monks, right?
Yeah.
I could see that being a personal, my father shoving me away. Again, making literal the very on the nose metaphor of my father shoved me away.
To some extent, it's like Billy Joel songs that are all pretty much just literal songs that happened to Billy Joel, or he saw them and it happened.
Right. Also, in case it wasn't clear, it's pretty obvious to me that Alejandro not a big fan of religion. Especially in the scene when the monks are stripped down naked, forced to dress like women, and then the bandits make out with them.
Well, we didn't really, we glazed over it, but to some extent, spiritualism is a very important part, or was to Alejandro to some extent. I think he even married Marilyn Manson in the 2000s, if memory serves. So like that spirituality is part of like whatever his journey is. I don't know.
Sure,
I don't know
but institutional religion, yeah. And this is again early days research, so I'm happy if people will correct me wrong. But as I understand it, Catholicism is pretty heavily entrenched in Mexico, right? So I can see why Mexican film authorities looked at that and said, "Fuck no, this ain't happening," right?
Yeah.
But also like some of this is. I could see why in 1970 people would be like really freaked out by this movie, but these days it's like, okay, so a bunch of men are kissing, you know?
Yeah. Oh. Which part do you want to touch on? There's a lot that happens. Or do we want to go on The monk makeout sessions. Do we want to go back to the village of blood, to the son bearing his first toy and his picture of his mother?
I, I mean, I think of all movies, this is not one we necessarily need to tackle in order.
Okay.
But like, El Topo's relationship with his son, weirdly, despite my instincts, turns out to actually be a character arc.
Yeah.
So, as much stick as I'm going to give this film, like, you can't say it's an incoherent mess because I really wanted to. Like, the whole time watching this, I'm going, "This is an incoherent mess." It's not. There actually is a plot line here. There's a characters evolve and change here in very deeply weird ways. But these scenes are necessary. Like, at one point in time, a man is dying. During a gunfight, a man gets wounded, and one of the bandits is dying, and El Topo gives his gun to his son and forces him to shoot the man dead. Right? And not knowing where this movie was going, my initial thought was just like, that's just deeply fucked up, right? It's like, because if this is all about imagery, it's about like, what are you saying about what is this a comment on men teaching their sons about toxic masculinity and violence as the only way forward to express your feelings? And it turns out, I mean, it may be also that, but separately, how El Topo treats his son matters for how the movie is going to evolve and change.
Yeah. A weird, I mean, I'm gonna say a weird part. One of the things though that
weird part, narrow it down,
always stuck out to me, even the first time it happened, I think even then, is how the characters pass guns to each other.
What do you
Like
mean?
they flip them around, and so they're holding them almost like they're like a holy sacrament of some kind. They're passing to another character. They don't like pass them like butt first. They don't pass them anything. They flip them in their hand and they sort of hold them with some sort of reverence and pass it over to each other. And even when they take it, whoever usually takes it holds it for a second before they turn it back into a weapon.
Right. This is a more prevalent in a much later scene. But yeah, the juxtaposition of religion and guns is very much a running set of tropes to this movie.
And it starts at the beginning all the way through. So that's
right. And it's one that has weirdly aged well as American viewers because the juxtaposition of organized religion and guns in U.S. politics over the past several decades also resonates really well. So again, one thing weirdly, the imagery has aged surprisingly well. It's moved from subtle to on the nose over time.
Yeah. As religion has primarily always used violence to institute itself into places.
Right, but I assume in late or more actually mid 60s, it was probably meant as a slightly more subtle allegory of the juxtaposition of violence and religion. In this case, it's a more literal juxtaposition.
Come on, subtle. What about the Inquisition, man? Our Crusades are.
But I mean, but yeah. I mean, the idea of using actually this relates to another point. Like, when he's also fighting the bandits at one point in time, they literally grab rifles but start smacking. They're having a sword fight with rifles, functionally, right? And so again, it's let's recontextualize using Western iconography, recontextualizing it through more medieval religious violence.
Yeah. All right. So the scene that I think you're discussing is like when he rides up on the horse and there are the three bandits and he quick draws and like kills two of them. Like little red spots appear on them essentially.
After the squeaky balloon, yes.
Yeah. And then the third one gets off and grabs a rifle and I think he throws him a rifle and then they do their rival butt fight.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the man that I think the son kills.
Yes.
I want you to remember that scene for when we talk about a movie that's in about two movies from now.
Oh God. Okay. Are there references to El Topo coming up? Oh God.
I think there will be. So we'll see. I didn't see it before, but maybe there is. We'll see when we get into it.
But again, like I'm gonna say subtle occasionally throughout this movie, and I have to say, subtle within the context of El Topo because most of the imagery is not subtle. I mean, when the colonel is a large man. He's bold. He's very much a gluttonous type in terms of he wants to take over his village and destroy it and control it. And when he leaves his hut after sexually assaulting a woman, a herd of black pigs runs out after him towards the camera. Right? It's not subtle, you know. So a lot of the imagery is like going. It is basically, what if I take these colloquial terms and make them literal? You know, so it's like Alejandro in a lot of ways is not trying to be subtle here, but because again, surrealism is about juxtaposing ideas to get people to start thinking about things. One of the most common surrealist images is a picture of a pipe with the phrase "This is not a pipe." Right? It's kind of peak surrealism, or not peak, basic surrealism, I should say. And so like the idea of this man is gluttonous, pigs are also gluttonous. So let's juxtapose these two symbols to really reinforce his character traits without actually saying anything on screen about what kind of man he is.
Yeah, and then you come out and you have the scene with like the Colonel, Maria, and his 4 bandits, and him explaining that how he occasionally gives people to them to keep them satiated or whatever before
Right.
El Topo and his son show up.
Right. Right. So there's a line that exchange that comes here that I originally put down as a joke because I was getting so frustrated with this movie. And it turns out to actually have been key to the whole film as I understand it now, which is bizarre to me. Because the El Topo defeats the general and actually humiliates him before. It doesn't actually just shoot him dead. It actually humiliates him, strips him of his clothes, and humiliates him before he kills him. And near
Eddie,
the end,
you say humiliate. He castrates the Colonel.
right? Well, I actually missed that part. But he does strip him naked and force him to walk in front of his men who laugh at him. So I missed the castration part.
I
Yeah,
guess I could be assuming, but when he hits him between the groin and there's like a little splat of blood, my assumption then is castration. Although in this movie, why wouldn't they show that too? They show every fucking thing
right,
else.
right. Um, but fair point. But then the general asks, "Who are you to hand out justice?" And El Topo says, "I'm God." Now I jokingly put, "I'm Batman," because that was the vibe I was getting out of the whole scene, right? Um, but then that led me down a rabbit hole of what is El Topo's faith, because at this point now we're 30 minutes into the movie, but this is the first time he's directly talking about faith of any kind. He says, "I am God." Later, he says things that contradict that, and so I thought it was an inconsistency. I have since come to realize it is an indication of El Topo's character arc, because he is the epitome of the Western gunslinger iconography. He's completely in power. He walks into a village. He takes complete control over it. He has utter authority over this man who was a villain. So he is, he feels like he is God. It's like I am invulnerable. I am the peak of masculine tropes in this genre. And I have acquired the woman. I've saved the woman, and I've taken her for myself as sexual conquest. I no longer need a child around, so I feel like I'm in charge of everything. Um, but I realize now that that's actually El Topo's decline from that is his character arc, whereas his son's arc is the opposite. Right? He becomes much more involved with faith. El Topo starts losing his faith over time.
So that going on with that, the reason that I then believe that he does that to the Colonel is to do the inverse of the Colonel, like to steal whatever his toxic masculinity was,
Oh,
and the
good point.
Colonel, in response, then commits suicide.
Literally steals his masculinity from him to take it for himself.
Yes, and then the Colonel kills himself because he doesn't have it anymore.
Right. That makes sense. But again, like the bandits from the iconography. Well, okay, let me say that. Because Alejandro is both Chilean and French, and he's filming this in Mexico, I sometimes struggle as to context here because, like, homosexuality signifiers were much more normalized in France than they were in Mexico. So I don't know if him moving these homosexual signifiers into an American trope shot in Mexico was intentionally meant to be a juxtaposition. It's like, you're not supposed to see these things in an American film. You're not supposed to see these things in a Mexican film. But again, so like it's not all homosexuals are depraved, because actually that line doesn't play out either in the movie. But these bandits are meant to be quote unquote depraved at this early start. So like I feel like the idea is to set up the expectation of, well, because they are whipping men and making out with men and forcing monks to dress as women, that homosexuality and evil are therefore linked, before he proceeds to uncouple that throughout the rest of the film. But I also don't know if he's not thinking about that clearly because he has a French background and therefore is not thinking about the context of these symbols in these other media spaces. I'm not sure.
So for me, that is the closest. Oh man, we're afraid. For me, that is one of the highlights that is historically accurate, was the homosexuality and larger range of sexuality in the West and what you ever get to see in any movies.
Agreed.
Because there was a vast number of people of all sorts of sexual orientations that never get any sort of visuals put on screen. And I think he is taking a historical piece and actually putting it into the surreal film. And I like the fact that it is there to highlight that part of history that rarely gets highlighted, especially in the 60s and 70s.
No, that I completely agree with. I'm saying from now perspective, yes. But I'm looking at it like from a kind of why was this film banned perspective, and going from our talk with Django, and say, okay, so the violence is on par with Django, where now we look at it and go, it's very obviously fake. But things like slasher films hadn't been normalized yet, and so that level of gore hadn't been normalized yet. So I feel like the alternative sexuality is on display in the film, and there's a lot of them. Maybe the other piece of it, but you're right. Like from a modern perspective, it's just like it's not the fact that they are presenting as gay. It is the fact that they're using the performative tropes of homosexuality to abuse other people. So it's not that their sexuality is the problem, is they're taking the symbols and using them as a form of abuse
Yes.
because they're evil.
And the thing is, I think they would be bisexuals because they're just as eager to do the same thing to Maria as they were to the monks.
True. Good point. Which I think reinforces both of our assertion that it's not about their sexuality, it's about finding different ways to abuse them. And because priests are so often linked with this, and say, let's use these symbols specifically with these priests to humiliate and abuse them.
Yeah. And given even more so from your comment about if Alejandro's opinion of mass religion is not as positive as it is.
Right. That's my assertion. I never say anything about it one way or the other, but that would be my guess based on the media I have consumed.
Yeah, that's the first 30 minutes. We had like a whole little Western story. We have our protagonist ride in. He has a shootout. He kills the bad guy. He gets the girl.
Right, and that's kind of where I stopped it there, because like
in a movie,
you could take that 30 minutes and actually have a very weird but functionally well-structured Western film. And then it keeps going.
Man, does it keep going.
After turning bitter water sweet by stirring it with a branch, El Topo names the woman Mara. In need of food and water, El Topo spaces Mara's feet apart and digs up eggs from the sands beneath them, then utters a prayer before shooting a rock, which then releases water. When Mara tries to use these same techniques, he turns up nothing, seeming to lack El Topo's faith. After El Topo tears her clothes, Maria becomes able to find eggs and water. She tells El Topo she will not return his love until he proves himself the best gunfighter by defeating the desert's 4 great gunmasters. Yes, I have glossed over the sexual assault. I have no strong desire to talk about that, if you don't mind.
Completely agree. That's why we talked about the top.
Right. Thank you. Because the rest of this is super fucking weird. Right. So, but like if you take all of the bizarre imagery out, it is the interesting sense that El Topo has faith. Now he says he himself is God, and here he says he has faith and she doesn't. Initially, I was like, so which is it? Come on, pick one, Alejandro. But I realized that El Topo doesn't say he has faith in God. He just has faith. So it very much could be faith in himself.
Yeah.
And so, yes, he's digging up eggs in the sand and shooting rocks to get water, but taking the symbols out of it for a second, he is a Western hero able to sustain himself in the desert because he has faith that he can survive in the desert because that's what Western protagonists do.
So, all right. If I think part of it is like shooting the rock and like the broom, like the branch and stuff is actually from religious texts of something. I think was it Moses did it or someone did it in
Oh,
rule.
okay.
So, and so there's parts of this that are like literally pulled from like religious texts. Part of it's I think pulled from like a story,
I actually didn't know
literally like
that. So.
ripped and slapped down into this movie that he
Wow.
like
Okay.
stole it wholesale.
All right. That's
Because
wild.
there we keep floating around the sun, but like the sun subplot we're gonna hit, I think is literally pulled from another story or like novel or something that covers that. Well, the little bit I remember,
Huh.
we'll touch on it then.
Okay.
But
All right.
I think in the Bible or somewhere there's a story about like bitter water being turned to sweet and someone named Maria associated with it. So that's why he names her Maria. Like that is real religious
Okay.
imagery and stuff.
Okay.
And the egg bits is because she's fertile as a woman. Come on. Like
I
that's
mean, right. She spreads her legs and then eggs, yeah.
right.
But she can't do that because he's not a woman. Yeah, right.
Wow.
Um,
So a lot of people say that the more you watch this, the more you understand it. And I know there was an interview from like in the 70s. Someone said, "This is my 22nd time watching this film." Eddie, could you imagine watching this film 2 more times?
God, no. But like, so, but the actual dynamic here, Samara's interesting, right? In the sense that we didn't talk very much in the scene because I think intentionally her role in the previous scenes was a bit backgroundy, but she was present. Um, and one of the things is that she was actually fully clothed. She actually wore more clothes than the priests did in a lot of those scenes. And when she was entertaining the other bandits, shall we say, she didn't seem hugely inconvenienced by it. So, what? Okay, I'm gonna have to talk about this slightly. So up to this point, she's just kind of following what everyone tells her. When she's rescued, she just kind of meekly gets on the horse. Whenever during the desert, she's just doing what El Topo says. After he sexually assaults her, she starts becoming an actual character. She starts having agency. She starts doing things for herself. She starts expressing stronger emotions, which is deeply problematic.
Do you want to know what Alejandro potentially said in an interview since we're touching on this again?
I mean, we already talked about the fact that he said he actually did that, which was just later claims was just spur outrage. But what else?
The in character piece he says is that she at climax during that and that awakened her and that's why she becomes a character,
Which goes in line with his tantric philosophy that pops up in other media he does.
so that's why she becomes more of a character now going forward.
Right.
But also, and to some extent, what he didn't say is that now she becomes almost like an Eve to his Adam.
Right. Okay.
He didn't say
which
that
makes
part. That's
sense.
what I'm putting onto like that connotation in her
No, but
character
that
arc
does
now
make
going forward.
sense. Uh, uh, I was looking at it more from because again we're looking at this in the context of westerns, so I was looking at it from slightly more a structural standpoint, in the sense of she was a prize to be won in the previous western structure we have in, and now because the very kind of 30s 40s westerns where the romantic relationships are extremely chaste, when they stopped being chaste, when they become real, we're moving into the spaghetti western, quote unquote, realism, if you will, the grittiness. She starts becoming a character because that's what the new requirements of the genre demand of her. She needs to be a person. And again, because most of the women with agency in the westerns we've seen have been sex workers, that's where my brain was kind of connecting the dots.
So now for me though, I think we flipped more into a hybrid Western Bible tale, essentially.
Right.
And eventually we're going to totally switch to Bible tale.
Yeah. No, but you give me that context helps me appreciate these scenes a bit better, because I thought it was just surreal imagery. I didn't realize it was literally reinforcing the ongoing narrative that El Topo is believes himself to be God because he's able to perform biblical miracles.
Yeah. Which is why she can do things afterwards and everything.
Right.
And some of the scenes here of like them riding so much, and it's just him on a horse. Even if you watch the scenes, like the hats change. Like sometimes she's in El Topo hat and he's in her hat and things like
Mm.
that.
Actually, I hadn't noticed that.
And one part of it I remember from back then is someone was talking about, I'm trying to remember how they phrased it. Like essentially he awakened her like her, I'm using finger quotes, masculinity, and she awoke like his finger quotes femininity, and so that's part of their shift. And like there's all sorts of different theories and things that people have applied to this, and I remember snippets of them from when I did Haunted West.
Sure. I mean, what does seem very clear to me is that until this chunk of the movie, everyone was just a broad stereotype. And again, because we're using the Western as the basis for it, he's the man with no name, he's Django, he's that archetype, and she is the prize to be won. And now that they're sharing their experiences, they've both become more well-rounded characters. Again, within the context of a very surreal acid Western. Um, so it's, but it's, this is what a chunk of scene where it's like, you can't take this out of the movie, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot that's okay. Let me take a step back. I'm fine with media making you sometimes uncomfortable, and we've had this conversation a few times, like with some of the black media we've talked about, where like I, as a white audience, am probably supposed to feel uncomfortable at this point in time because that's the point of the movie, you know. So media making me uncomfortable isn't an issue. This chunk makes me uncomfortable in ways that I am not happy with.
Do you care
And
to
I think it's
delve into that, or do you want to move past it?
well, I think it's because I can see the intent to make Mara more of a character through this progression of imagery. Um, but I am deeply frustrated by the, I'm just gonna say the word, deeply uncomfortable with rape as character agency for women as a trope.
100% agree.
So this has aged extremely badly because it's a very explicit manifestation of that exact trope.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not helped by a completely different set of images we're about to move into. So unless you have anything
The
else about this chunk.
just that she essentially then tasked him to go on almost like his own, oh, what was it, like the 12 trials of Hercules or some sort of
Yeah,
quest like that to fulfill like love for her.
that's a good point. That's a good shout. Uh, because that's what the next chunk's gonna be about. Is that very? It's a very literal mythic quest. You must go through. a series of trials to women love. So now we moved into almost a chivalrous structure, and we haven't talked about it much, but the relationship between let's call it collectively, although somewhat incorrectly, Arthurian stories of knights and the American archetype of Western gunslingers, there's a fair amount of overlap, and certainly lots of media have found synergy with that. The Dark Tower series by Stephen King being the most obvious example, but there have been others that have explored the juxtaposition of Western iconography with Arthurian structures.
Mm-hmm.
God, we sound so smart talking about this movie.
Wait, Eddie, but the difference is, even if we are those super smart artsy people, we wouldn't call other people stupid if they didn't agree with us.
Agreed. Absolutely. No, we wouldn't be those assholes. This is our media wonk.
And do you notice how I actively avoided going into a deeper discussion about Arthurian myth versus the Western mythology?
We'd be here for days.
yeah, we would. You put a landmine out, and I want people to know that I took my Fallout perk and I walked right over it without exploding.
Good job.
You were saying?
I was about to move on unless you had something else for this chunk.
No.
Okay. After searching the desert in a spiral, they eventually find the first gun master, and even though El Topo fears he is not good enough, he manages to kill him. After the first duel, a black-clad woman who speaks the man's voice finds the couple and guides them to the remaining gunmasters. Each gunmaster ritualistically kills El Topo and then teaches him something before dying, while Mara and the woman in black develop a relationship. After he kills the second and third masters, El Topo has increasing doubts about his mission, but Mara persuades him to continue. So, I'm going to jump right to the part that bothers me before I talk about the rest of this. The first gunmaster, there's a man with no arms who ties up the gunmaster's hair with his feet and paints with his mouth, while he also carries a man with no legs.
Mm-hmm.
This is a common trend, which as far as I know may have started with Alejandro, but it's persisted certainly afterwards and may have been before, of disabled people as surreal imagery. The idea of if we see people with lesser limbs or who are formed in different ways, that shows that this thing is bizarre and strange. The backwards talking man in Twin Peaks is another example of this, right? And it sucks. It's terrible. Never been a fan of it. We're going to see a lot of it in this movie. So I'm kind of just getting it all out now. I fucking hate it. And Alejandro's in fucking love with this. So I'm going to talk around a lot of that for the rest of this movie. But I want to at least address it. It's happening, and it's happening a lot.
So I mentioned I expunged a lot of this movie from my mind, and I watched it later than you. And when we hit this part, if you hadn't already watched it, I was potentially going to pull this movie. But you'd already seen it. And at that point in time, I was like, well, fuck, I can't say that now. It made him endure it. We might as well get it out.
Right. I almost contacted you and say, hey, can we skip this movie? I almost did at this point. But I said, I'm going to get through. I want to see the whole thing before I make that decision. There is a part later in the movie that kind of sort of vaguely redeems this. But right here, right now, because we're in the acid Arthurian myth of trials here, it just sucks.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of naked women in this movie. So, there's that too.
Well, if it makes you feel better, there are some mostly naked dudes in the movie too.
There are a lot of naked dudes. Granted, most of the naked dude quotient has been a small child, which is not great either.
Which is utterly fucking disturbing, on every level. And I know that part of his thing is, well, it represents innocence. Ugh. Put him in a diaper.
Put some pants on that innocence. I will say to the movie's credit, we're already past those scenes, but to the movie's credit, the kid never gets sexualized. One of the few things that doesn't get sexualized in this movie is baby El Topo's son. So there's that. But
and the fact that each gun, each of these gun wielders take time to explain their theories and principles on life to El Topo.
Yeah,
is as fascinating and weird at the same time, but it's all going to be important for later.
Right. Like, and to be fair, when I first started watching this, so peek behind the curtain. What I usually do with these is I will try to find a reasonably robust plot summary before I start watching the movie, and I'll copy paste it in, and then as I go through the movie, I go through and edit. Um, and so I knew there was going to be gun masters coming up and whatnot, but basically the original summary just said he kills them all. And so I was not prepared for the lengthy conversations, and I realized after the third one that each of them, in some way, quote unquote, kills El Topo. And I was like, "Oh, this is a resurrection reference to tie into the religious stuff we're talking about here. Okay, that makes a ton of sense. I see why this is happening here." And so we get the interesting juxtaposition of El Topo keeps dying and coming back, but each time he dies, he's less in touch with his religious faith, not more. So each time he confronts a gun master, he loses his faith, which was
And it's like
actually interesting.
Maria takes on more of a personality for each one,
Right, she almost feeds off of him.
like a
Um,
vampire.
yeah, yeah, and there's, after the first one, I think, she starts getting obsessed with mirrors, and, even when a mirror gets, when Azaba shoots a mirror, she collects all the shards. So she becomes obsessed with herself and eventually becomes obsessed with another woman.
El Topo collects the shards
Oh, he does? Okay, sorry. But
because
I think he says it.
it's going to be important that he has all the shards too, because
Well, yeah, yes, that
he
part I knew, but I think he says, "I will hold these for you." Doesn't he?
that I don't remember.
There may
Could
have
be
been a lot.
probably.
I got the impression from that scene that he was doing it for her. So, or she says, "Please collect those," something like that. So it was either at her behest or because he wanted to give it to her. But she is still connected to the mirrors. Is more what I'm saying. Right.
And the big thing is for even for El Topo to beat the first gunmaster, he has to cheat because he knows that he can't beat him. And he goes back to Maria and she says, "You can still win. We'll just cheat." And she gives him the idea to cheat, and then he proceeds to cheat to beat the gunmaster.
Right. Right. Which now that you say the Adam and Eve allegory, the woman in black then becomes maybe the snake in this allegory. Like the whispering, tempting words and to try to corrupt Eve.
To some extent, which then would play on a tongue scene we're going to see later too.
Right. Right. And again, what's interesting is the woman in black is redubbed with a man's voice, and she's also wearing clothes that are very similar to El Topo.
Mm-hmm.
So I very yeah. So I said relationship, but basically, it's very clear they have a sexual relationship. And that relationship increases as El Topo continues to lose faith. But it very much reads like she is slowly replacing El Topo. She did not exist or was not present until his first betrayal. And
Mm-hmm.
then she exists. Then as he continues to die and come back, and each time it's through a trick, he becomes more of the trickster than just the pure masculine power. And the woman in black takes more and more space as a result of that.
And she's actually the one that gives Mara the mirror.
Right. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point.
And even when El Topo and her are having relations, she's staring into the mirror and not at him.
Yes. Yeah, because first the one in black and Mara kiss, and then she goes to kiss El Topo, but then yeah, she has the mirror behind his back, and she's looking into it.
Now, Eddie, I'm really curious. Do you think the Doctor Who writer that wrote the Mara episodes saw El Topo? Or you think they might be referencing like a biblical story, but they don't think the biblical story had mirrors, so it has to be El Topo for the Mara to have this mirror issue from Doctor Who. El Topo is the center of the universe for all cinema. Boom, done.
Yeah, obviously, I can't possibly argue that because it makes no fucking sense. Um, no,
But
I
Eddie,
think they're
the
both.
Mara can't look at its own reflection. So it's like
Well,
an inverse of
I
El
think
Topo.
it's both referencing a Buddhist story, actually. So
If you want to bring out real facts.
details and actual information.
All right, so essentially for the first gun master, he builds a pit so the guy falls into it and then kills him.
Just Wile E. Coyote bullshit, but whatever.
And for the second one, who is obsessed with his mother, who he can't beat, he uses the broken glass to defeat him.
Right. And actually, from the first one, he learns how to take a bullet. Right.
Because the first one lets the bullets pass through his soft parts of my flesh or whatever.
Right. So it says not to fear being shot. The second one is about delicate accuracy. Because it's all about making intricate copper work things. It's like going, you can shoot anything, destroy it, but to shoot a very specific piece of it was the element. The third one is a musician who's with a bunch of rabbits who are dying. I remember what we learned from the third one.
He said the rabbits are dying because El Topo is there.
Right.
Something about the heart and the mind, but the reason that the way that he can beat this guy is because he took the copper work from the second one because he knew he was going to get shot in the heart. So, side note.
Yes, that's right. It's because the third one is that you shoot anybody in the head, but shoot them in the heart that will truly kill them. And so El Topo wears something under his coat to protect his heart, and therefore cheats the gunfight. Right, that was it.
So, I don't know if this is true, but I think that it is, even more so as we talk about Alejandro. That motherfucker killed all those rabbits.
Sadly, I think you're right. Because a lot of dead rabbits.
Yeah.
And then the first master gets buried in the pit. Second master gets buried in... No. First master gets buried in bees?
Yes.
Second master gets buried...
we don't see him buried, but when he comes back, he's in that weird, intricate structure that you're about to talk about.
Right. And the third one gets buried under the rabbit corpses and then set on fire.
Yeah. To know that those rabbits are really dead rabbits, as an actor that has to lay under those, I mean, it's horrible on every level. And even... okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Deeply uncomfortable in a lot of ways. So it's kind of a weird chunk because it's a meaningful chunk and there's a lot of imagery there, but also once you've talked about one master, you kind of got the structure for another 15 minutes of the film.
And these scenes they go on too long. All right.
Yeah.
This is a structural thing. I'll put my part of my disgust from the movie aside. This movie should have been an hour and a half.
Yeah. Well, it's the pacing is all weird in this movie. We can talk about it more at the end, I suppose. But it is both way too a lot of stuff happens in 2 hours, but also this feels longer than the 3-hour movie we watched last time.
Yeah. But the thing is, I want to point out, we're not at the hour mark yet, Eddie.
No, I'm halfway through. Right. Okay, so after the final gun master outsmarts El Topo by killing himself before El Topo is able to kill him, El Topo is ridden with guilt, destroys his own gun, and revisits the place where he killed the masters, finding the corpses either on fire, covered with geometrical objects, or swarming with bees. The woman in black confronts El Topo and shoots him several times in the matter of stigmata. Mara then rides off with the woman while El Topo collapses and is carried away by a group of outcasts. So yeah, the fourth gunmaster doesn't even have a gun. He just deflects bullets with a net.
With a butterfly net.
The butterfly net.
Oh my god.
And this is when I started to realize that there's actually some connectivity happening here, which surprised the hell out of me halfway through the movie, because El Topo's mad at the fourth gunmaster because he doesn't have a gun. It's like, you're a gunmaster. You have a gun. That's the whole thing. Get a gun. And so he digs between his feet in exactly the same way El Topo did and pulls out what is very obviously a toy, crappy gun. And it's like, I don't know, is this good enough? And so therefore implying that this gunmaster can take the things that El Topo does and does them better, but will do it in a way to mock El Topo, which again reinforces El Topo's slide to being a trickster.
Yeah. Uh,
So
so
I was in a weird place where it's like, am I overthinking this movie, or is this movie actually starting to make sense? And what does that say about me that I'm actually finding this movie's making some weird sort of sense?
I don't think you're overthinking it. There's a reason why I'm assuming it resonated so much with people that were trying to find enlightenment like in the 70s, like, and it
Yeah,
became their
yeah.
cultural touchstone. There has to be something there that maybe we with current day eyes are not seeing to the same extent.
I wonder, and this is going to seem like a very bizarre cross reference, but I wonder if the kinds of people who saw this in 1970 to get meaning and enlightenment are the same kinds of people who saw Mage the Ascension and thought they got meaning and enlightenment from that game.
Could be. Or it could also be the fact that it's super early in the morning for me, and I'm assuming that you also are doing a whole bunch of psychedelic drugs before you watched El Topo.
I mean, maybe.
Because it could be
I'll never
like
admit
Pink
it.
Floyd's The Wall, where people admit they take drugs. The movie is like infinitely better. Or listen to
Right,
the album.
right. I mean, and again, this is literally, called an acid western. So like, drugs are definitely a part of this movie on some level, right?
Yeah. Or they were much like the guy that made Cleopatra Jones. They're sitting in Rome and they heard a voice in their head. They come back. They should tell them to make a movie. Um,
Well, you proved to me that was not drugs. That was just a voice in their head.
it is. Oh, but the glee they have the fourth master use when he takes his own life, so El Topo can't win,
Right.
is is beautiful. I'm sorry. It is like a man in like a diaper with like a gleeful smile and a butterfly net. It's like, oh, you lost. I was
Right.
waiting for like him to do a riff on Yoda. Lost you have. And then like
Nice job. Oh, yes. That was probably the most Monty Python and the Holy Grail I think the movie ever got. I was like, ha ha, I've killed myself. I mean, short of just sticking his tongue out when he died. It was very over the top. But again, it weirdly works because this is such a. I don't want to say it's such a surreal part of the movie because that doesn't make any fucking sense. But like the most mythical part of the movie, right?
yeah.
So things make mythic sense. They make even less logical sense than the movie normally does. These are all mythic quests, and these are all literally people who just sit in the middle of the desert waiting for someone to approach them to resolve their mythic quest. So they don't need to make sense.
Has for your Arthurian myth riff, has El Topo now become Gawain?
I think so. Yeah.
Hmm. That's it. It's so sad that we know all this. All right, sorry. It's so sad that I know all this. I'm using my brain space to remember all. What the fuck am I doing
Right.
with my life?
Um, but also like during the conversation with the final gun master, there's a conversation, and El Topo makes the comment that he believes in God, but he doesn't think God believes in him, or something along those lines. I actually didn't write that one down. Which is where I started going, wait, is he God? Does he believe in God? And that's when I kind of put together, oh, this is, he's no longer God. He's losing faith, and so therefore he's starting to displace. There's now a God above him. Um, which got me on a rabbit hole. Like, is this a Father, Son, Holy Ghost allegory? Does
Yeah,
Alejandro think he's Christ? And I thought, okay, maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe we'll step back that a bit.
and then he
But
got stigmata.
right, but then he gets stigmata, right? And so I was like, okay, well, maybe that's back on the table now. Hold on.
Oh
um,
god.
and based on how things evolve, I don't think Father, Son, and Holy Ghost is necessarily a bad comparison because he starts off as God in the first part of the movie. Here he becomes Christ. And then later he quote unquote dies and comes back as somebody else. You know, we'll get there.
Well,
We'll
all
get
right.
there. But
Do we want to wrap up this piece with the woman
yeah, I
in
think
black and Mara and all that?
right. Okay, so yeah, because we're getting wrapped up in the Gunmaster. Uh, Mara and the Woman in Black have completed their relationship, and she is now completely taken El Topo's place to the point where Mara once again jumps onto the back of the horse, and El Topo now gets shoved away in the same way that he shoved his son away earlier.
And we have like before that their tongues serpentine kiss together.
Right.
And after she shoots El Topo and makes him kind of how he is, she literally hands a gun to Mara to decide, and she also shoots El Topo. So far, I think she also shot some of the people for the first gun master, but now she also shoots El Topo, and they ride off in the sunset together.
Right. And that's when he decides to destroy his gun and just completely gets collapses.
And that's the first hour, Eddie. That's an hour. Now we get to the last hour and a bit of this movie.
Right. So we move on to the next part then?
Yeah. Fucking hour and a bit for the... All right. Go ahead.
So after he gets dragged away by a group of outcasts, El Topo awakens many years later, in a cave to find that the tribe of outcasts have taken care of him and come to regard him as a godlike figure while he has been asleep and meditating on the Gunmaster's 4 lessons. The outcasts dwell in a system of caves which have been blocked in. The only exit is out of their reach. When El Topo awakens, he is born again and decides to help the outcasts escape. He's able to reach the exit and, together with a girl who becomes his lover, performs for the depraved slave-owning cultists of the neighboring town, who raise money for dynamite to assist in digging a tunnel on one side of the mountain where the outcasts have effectively been kept prison. So El Topo, in the best gray beard makeup I've ever seen, like clearly just powder all over his facial hair. Like, I'm an old man now. It's like that really all your budget could stretch to okay, you're old, whatever.
But he's reminiscent now of the final Gunmaster, though.
Right. Which
Diaper
I think
and all.
is the bigger P. Because he's not wearing much, and most of his clothes have probably rotted away. And then we find out that the woman taking care of him, she was born while he was there. So her entire life, he was just sitting there in the cave. So he's been there for decades, at least. And then they shave his face, they shave his head, and they go through a dance where he wriggles out from under someone's tabard. So he's literally reenacting his birth. So again, not subtle, Jodorowsky. Not at all.
Oh god.
And he says at this point, I'm not God, I'm a man. So even though the outcasts believe him to be a god, he is now rejecting identity entirely, which is completely at odds where he started this movie from.
So are you saying so far he's going from God, the son of God, to prophet?
Right. Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. And even then, he has all of the trappings and instincts of a person of faith, but he's rejecting. He's not explicitly saying, I believe in God, or I believe in anything. He just acts like a holy man, even though he never discusses his actual faith.
Yes. And this is so painful. I am in utter pain at this point, by the way.
In regards to
the whole movie.
Oh yeah. Again, just to touch on it real quick, all of the outcasts are disabled in some way, and there's actually a line that says they're all deformed from continuous incest, and it's just oh, why did we have to go there? It's just edgelord bullshit.
If the little bit I think I remember about Alejandro, this is a part of his work that he constantly goes back to and touches on all the time.
It does, unfortunately, from
obsessively so.
Yeah, he's incest and on the positive side, he does to explore alternative sexuality and present them all as equal footing, particularly in sci-fi work where it's the future, everyone fucks whoever they want to. So that's positive. But then he gets into a lot of, and incest is bad, and so to talk about how it's bad and here's why it's bad, and it's we get it. You seem a little too insistent on this point, my friend. Is there something you want to tell us?
We're going to talk about how he climbs out of the cave with his future lover slash maybe wife.
I mean, so okay, so the woman is a little person, but weirdly, um, so it's relevant for a chunk we're gonna get to here in actually, no, it's relevant now because they perform for the community, and their height disparity is a joke that they constantly play to get them to give them money.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why this actually lands okay for me is because partially because the movie does not make fun of her. They're exploiting other people's evil instincts against her for their own benefit. And this is actually a common trend, specifically going back to your point about this is actually presenting real history and just presenting it through the lens of a surreal film. The quote unquote freak shows were a very common way for people with disabilities
Mm-hmm.
to get money to survive by just showing off to people, to able people.
Yeah.
So it's at this point, it's like, okay, while I do not like this obsession, I would continue not like this obsession, it's still a problem. On the other hand, Alejandro did hire a whole lot of disabled actors, gave them some good work, and in at least a couple cases gave them fairly meaty, interesting parts to
Mm-hmm.
play. So I'm like, all right. That's when I was like, okay, I think I could finish this movie because there's something here. It's not just exploitative. It's still exploitative, but
Oh
it's
yeah.
not exclusively that. And
And
weirdly, Alejandro is criticizing the very thing he's doing in the movie by saying, "Look at you look at people who are disabled, and you throw them money and you laugh at them, and that's not okay." And it's like, but that's also what you're doing. But okay,
and she becomes like his real love interest and like I think true love for the
yeah,
entire movie.
yeah. They fall in love with each other, and they have an actual. I mean, we go into a little bit later, but like they actually have an actual relationship and character because you were saying disparagingly and rightfully so, we have another hour to go through, but that doesn't mean they have an hour of character time with these two characters. It's not just she's not just on screen to fill her. And weirdly, she has more character agency from the start than Mara ever did.
Yes. All right. We have to talk about the
Racism,
women's league in this cult and the sheer
right?
and the racism it shows, which also is historically accurate and present day accurate too about this black guy just trying to do his job and he gets essentially sexually assaulted by these white women who then claim
Yep,
that he assaulted them and he gets killed. It is
yep,
history to present day, still happen all the time.
yep. That was. I mean, you know more than I do, but like that is definitely a common thing that happens quite a lot. Is that women would very obviously seduce black men, and then get them killed so they can clean up their crime. It's basically, from their perspective, they get away with it completely.
So that's in there. And I think that is that literally the I think only black character in the whole movie? I think it is.
Yeah. Um, so I'm gonna again early days, still doing research, very reductive, but this also ties into there's genuine racism in Mexico as well. Um, uh, there is a very rough caste system still in place in Mexico that does tie to skin color. Um, and it basically comes down to like the lighter skinned Mexicans being directly of Spanish descent, whereas the darker skinned Mexican being of much more indigenous descent. And there's still a perceived disparity there. So like this also would have resonated even in Mexican communities. This wasn't a purely American phenomenon.
So I'm not sure what you're working on because we haven't talked about it. But this is a chance for me to say I think there is a reference point in Haunted West where we actually talk about the caste system that was established based on like Spanish heritage in Mexico in the book.
Right. I think I remember reading that, and that led me down the side
Mm.
research thing. Because I remember reading stuff. They take a step back. Part of the reason why I knew about this also is because of part of the reason why luchadors were so popular is because they wore masks. Um, there was a parasocial component of they transcends the caste system, even though they're half naked. You can clearly see what their skin color is, but because they're wearing a mask, everyone kind of agrees. I don't know where you fit into society.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating cultural concept. In the same way that in England or in Britain, um, you can go into a pub and it didn't matter what your accent is, as long as you're standing the next rounds, you could talk on an equal level. But outside the pub, you have very different cultural rules and class rules. So there are these weird little kind of mental loopholes in society of places were allowed to ignore these things, and pressure wrestling was one of those spaces. But that does stem from uh, an interesting subsect of that is that statistically speaking, more light-skinned Mexicans were rudos or bad guys in luchadors, whereas more dark-skinned Mexicans were technicos or good guys in wrestling.
Did you notice another beat here that is very reminiscent of Stagecoach, and also just kind of historically true to some extent?
Which one?
And it's also in oh fuck, I forgot what the musical's called now. That's right. But essentially the women's league having so much power to strut through town and do everything.
Yes, yes. Uh, uh, they we're not quite there yet, but there's another scene a little bit later where the women's league come in, they go into space, and they declare it certify it to be clean, and then they step out of shot and immediately open a trap door, and there's a bunch of depravity happening in the basement. So not only do they have much power, but also they're a semi-willing accomplice to a cover-up of actual depravity.
Yeah. Well, in Stagecoach, it's the women's league that runs out the sex worker and the doctor from town.
Right. But even then, I think we talked about in Stagecoach, like it was a little performative because of we talked about how the power that both of them would actually have in those kinds of cultures and blah blah blah. So oftentimes they would chase out people that were themselves had no power, so it was pretty much safe to chase them out. And then otherwise, it's the oh yeah, she's a sex worker, but she goes to church every Sunday, so that's okay. But until you're not okay, and then we'll find a reason to get you out of town.
I guess we can move on unless you want to talk about the eye on all their stuff.
I'll get
As
that
they're
actually in the next section.
okay.
Because it's pretty short actually. Because we're talking about Hijo comes in. So he's now a young monk. He's a grown man. He arrives in town to be the new priest, but he's disgusted by the religion the cultists practice and their violent preoccupation with guns and their obsession with the pyramid and the eye iconography that's everywhere. Despite El Topo's great change in appearance, Hijo recognizes him and intends to kill him on the spot, but agrees to wait until he succeeded in freeing the outcasts. So that's a short summary because this stuff. So there's 3 clear stages to this section, but also it does kind of blur together because the last half of the movie is all dealing with this town functionally.
Okay.
So yeah, we kind of start bleeding into that is like we do have Hijo coming in and he has a different kind of faith, right? Um, El Topo's faith has come from the lessons he learned from the gun masters and how he's internalized that and it's kind of a more personal spirituality than an actual religious faith. Hijo comes in and he very much hates the religion that the cultists have. But again, it reads more like the Catholic priest has come into town is trying to clean things up, not necessarily because he's disgusted by it, but also his face coming from a different place. I think is the best way to put it. Because there's a scene where, um, because again, Alejandro, same thing, subtle. They're all literally praying to a gun, and then they pass the gun around as Russian roulette, and they put it to their heads and pull the trigger. And every time they fail to kill themselves, it's like it's a miracle. And then when Hijo comes in to disrupt this, the person running this ceremony is like, "Oh no, the safety's on. Don't worry about it. And so Hijo very visibly turns the safety off, takes out the bullet, picks a bullet from the medicine, puts it in, and then does the thing. And everybody else, not knowing that this is a problem, says the same thing. It's a miracle. But the cult leaders are like visibly like very uncomfortable all of a sudden. And then a kid goes, "Oh, that's fun," and takes the trigger and blows his own head off. And I'm like, "Oh my god, Alejandro, you were just clearly have an axe to grind here." But again, like in 2026 America right now, a white society obsessed with religion and guns, children killing themselves because their parents or guardians leave loaded weapons around, sex workers being treated as property before they're excommunicated and ridiculed, which we'll get to in a second. All that doesn't seem like allegory. It just seems like things that happen.
Yeah. This also, the progression of time here has been ongoing. And one of the things I want to touch on is that El Topo, and I don't even know if they gave her a name, have been like digging out this hole. They've been slowly digging the hole, going into town, making money, and coming back. One of the things that why I mentioned the women's league is when they said that like your place is clean. El Topo and her are forced to do their act downstairs and then forced to engage in relations with each other.
Right, because they're basically told like, "Hey, do the kissing trick," and so the trick is that they go to kiss, but then she misses him because she's too short, and then he goes down to reach her, and she reaches up, and they keep missing each other, and then eventually he gets a small ladder, and she climbs up and kisses him, and that's it's a joke, but the kissing, and then he's like, "I want to see the sequel," and so basically forces them to have sex with each other so they can point and laugh at them for doing it. And going back to our earlier point, and she's just like, "Just look at me, ignore them. I want to be here with you. I love you," which makes her immediately a very interesting character. She's always throughout it all has interesting and strong dialogue, but at this point in time, she's like, "No, she's reassuring him."
And like, because she takes control of the scene and lets him know what they need to do, and she expresses her true emotions for him.
Right.
Which then comes back to be played later where she's ashamed and he reassures her there's no reason to be ashamed that he loves her. And that's when they run to get married. And that's when they meet his son. So like all of that is like little plot beats and stories that comes up to that point. But it shows his real relationship with her over the past, like, we'll say 6 months so far.
Right. And because of how I'm explaining this, like, we don't know that the monk is Hijo until he recognizes his father and tries to kill him. So initially, he's just a monk that came into town because so much time has passed. He's obviously grown up. We never hear his name until that moment.
But we should know because she said that I wasn't born yet when you were here, and she's probably like 20 in her early 20s.
Right. So, yeah, through context clues, you can figure out he's been meditating or in a coma or whatever for the whole time that Hijo grew up.
Sad.
Right. So like, yeah, it's so at this point of the movie, it's kind of weird because like the movie has stopped just doing random bullshit. It's all very surreal and weird, but it's consistently like the cult acts in a consistent way throughout this hour. The iconography they use is consistent through this hour. There's still random shit like Hiju tearing down all of the pyramids with the eyes on it and then pulls down the big one and there's a cross behind it and he starts to pray. So it's like, okay, oh, look, the cult is a cover for institutionalized religion. We get it, Alejandro. We get it. You don't like religion. We got it. But like, in spite of that, there are, Hijo's character arc suddenly snaps into focus. He's bitter because his father abandoned him to the church, and he wants to kill him over it. Hijo and this woman, again, I don't think she's name. You're right. Develop a genuine relationship, which is very different from the way his relationship with Mara was, where they were just using each other functionally because they weren't characters yet. They were just archetypes going through emotions. Now he's actually a character. She's actually a character. Hijo's rapidly becomes a character. all the people around them, the villagers and the cultists, are still broad stereotypes, but now we have actual characters inside of this set of tropes, and those tropes aren't moving as much anymore. It's not just random stuff happening. So it's where the movie settles down at this last hour a bit.
All right, I'm gonna wait for you to read the next part, and then I'll go into that.
Right, because it doesn't stay there. Let me make it clear. Now wearing his father's black gunfighter clothes, Hijo grows impatient at the time the project is taking, and he begins to work alongside El Topo to hasten the moment where he will kill him. At the point where Hijo is ready to give up on finishing the tunnel, El Topo breaks through into the cave. The tunnel has been completed, but Hijo finds he cannot bring himself to kill his father. The outcasts come streaming out, but as they enter the town, they're shot down by the cultists. El Topo helplessly witnesses a community being slaughtered and is shot himself. Powering through his wounds, he ends up massacring the town, then takes an oil lamp and immolates himself. His lover gives birth at the same time during all of the violence, and she and his son make a grave for his remains. This becomes like a beehive similar to one of the Grand Gunmaster's graves, and El Topo's son rides off with his father's lover and child on horseback. So the movie settles down and lulls you in false security, and it's like, okay, never mind. Here we go again.
So one of the reasons I think the movie settles down is I am fairly certain, and this is a story I don't remember, is that there is a story about like a kid or a student who comes back to kill their own master, but the master and them train for a while, so then he realizes he can't kill his master and decides not to do it. So like that is almost directly lifted from another story and
Feels
put
like
into
that.
this. Which is why I think it has that settled feeling, and I'm not sure how much of this Alejandro coming up with and Alejandro just stealing from sources I am unaware of. Like, oh, listen to this in here, listen to this in here. And part of me is wondering also, is he talking about the concept of like predeterminism? Because the name of the movie is El Topo. He is a mole. Literally, he spends the entire premise of his existence is to dig that hole. So then it becomes, is faith relevant if everything's already predetermined?
Right, which again, like it's the at the very beginning, I was like, why are we talking about moles? What's going on? What is happening? And then here at the end of the movie, it's like, oh, a certain percentage of things actually, yeah, he's literally digging a hole for freedom. And I believe in the documentary bit, they talked a bit about how tunnels dig moles to lay their eggs and to evade predators, something like that. And he digs a tunnel and has children and tries to evade predators, but then they all get murdered.
And the thing is, like his son joins him because he convinces his son to help them if he wants to kill him. That's like how the son doesn't kill him right then. And then you know that like they're doing all this together for 9 months because that's how long it take for her to have a kid. And that's assuming like she gets impregnated right away and then it's 9 months. Otherwise, it could have been like years they're doing this.
Right. And again, there's an interesting barb because he was a priest. And that's extremely clear. And he changes to his father's clothing as soon as he threatens to kill his father. He's like, I can only wear the trappings of a priest if I'm going to murder my father. But then El Topo's like, if you want to do this, you have to beg with us. And so El Hidro changes his clothes again, but not into his priest clothing to beg for things. So he cannot debase himself while he's wearing the robes of a priest. And you're right. He does for 9 months. He lives with the man he wants to eventually kill, and turns out he can't do that, and develops some kind of caring relationship with his mother-in-law, functionally.
Yeah. And so the reason I say could be wife because we don't know if they were ever married. I would assume no if he's turned away his priestly duties while he's on this revenge kick.
Right. But for all functional purposes, they're a man and a wife, right? What the relationship is very clearly that of a man and a wife. And then, El Topo's grave turns into bees, so therefore he is ascended to be very similar to one of the gunmasters in terms of his abilities. Which again, his evolution into a trickster, because the last hour of the movie, everything he earns is not through violence, it's through his wits. He only turns to violence when he has no other choice, when everyone's dying. And then when he does that, he immediately regrets it and sets the ball on fire because he regrets having to actually pick up the gun.
So 2 points. First, a thing from my understanding, the reason he chose self-immolation for himself, I think, is that supposedly his grandfather died in a fire accident, like something in the house had a fire, and so that was
Okay.
so like there's a lot of Alejandro in this movie if you know a lot about him. I know tidbits. My second point is, does that mean he went God, son of God, prophet, saint?
Yeah, maybe. So yeah, it's interesting because like there's obviously a lot of Buddhist and New Age spiritualism crammed in here, psychedelic spiritualism crammed in here,
Which he
but
was a huge proponent of.
right, he absolutely was. And yet, tantric sex, whatever. But there's a very, very clear, specifically Catholic chunk of imagery, not even like subtly referenced. It's the bedrock of this movie. The Catholic imagery is constant throughout this whole film.
All right. Closing thoughts. Eddie, what did you think of El Topo? The mole.
I didn't like it. I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I can't look back at my time watching the movie and going, "Huh, I enjoyed that." Arguably, it is not a movie intended to be enjoyed. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to keep that in mind. Um, is it a good movie? Probably not. you know? Uh, because again with surrealism, I mean, all art is subjective, and I think we've all been pretty firm components of that. And every time we talk about whether a movie's good or bad, or TV show is good or bad, we're always intending to frame that within our own expectations. With surrealism, it's even harder. It's even more open to interpretation. So it's even harder to pin that down. Because I can't point to anything and say this is a break in a form, or this is shot badly or paced weirdly, because normally those are things that we look at for more structural things. This stuff, how much that's intentional, how much of this is bad, we don't know, right? Um, but I had to watch the 20-minute chunks. I could not watch this regularly. And weirdly, again, like I think this is functionally 2 or 3 films crammed together, so I don't think that was necessarily a bad way to approach it.
Yeah.
So in retrospect, I don't regret doing it that way anyway. The movie made me think, which I think maybe is ultimately the highest praise I can give it. It made me think. What I thought was just a bunch of random bullshit turned out to be a lower percentage of random bullshit than I originally feared. There is actual characterization and plot and structure happening here, so it is a story. It is a movie. Certainly will never watch it again unless someone puts a gun to my head with the safety on. But I don't know. I'm not entirely sure I can even say I'm glad I watched it. I do agree with your assertion. It is useful to have watched this to talk about it within the context of Westerns. So from that perspective, it was a success.
All right. So, oh man. All right, I have to know first and foremost, Eddie, has this destroyed any faith in me putting up movies now for you for anything else I do going forward?
Deeply suspicious for a while, right? Like I know that some of the movies you put, like, yeah, this would be funny having to watch it, but like I'm like Cowboys and Dinosaurs, but that's fun, and I like that, or it's like Cowboys and Dracula. Okay, it's dumb, but we can have fun. This is like, what have you made me watch? But I enjoyed the conversation way more than the movie. But this was not one of the ones where we were like, oh, this is bad, and we're having fun talking about how bad it is. That's not it. But if I also agree, like if you would give me any inkling what this movie was, I'd probably put the brakes on it. And we both said at some point in time we were like, maybe we shouldn't talk about this. So this is very close to just being dumped. And I think if we had said ahead of time, "Hey, by the way, here's all the stuff's in it," I would've been like, "Maybe we just skip it." So, I'm kinda glad we did it this way, but certainly, yeah, every time you're like, "Hey, Eddie, we should watch the movie. Don't question it." I'm gonna be like, "No, I'm gonna question it."
I just want to point out, I said don't question Sinners too, and you went in and you enjoyed Sinners. So just think about that.
That's true.
All
That's
right.
true. A 75% hit rate is still pretty good, but it does mean 25% of the time you have struck out, so
I think I'm at a solid like 90, but I won't argue with you. So close to having made you watch this. I'll wait a couple weeks for argue that.
It feels bigger right now.
On the whole, much like you, I don't like this movie. I'm I'm not gonna lie. But it's not made to be liked. I'm trying to
Yeah.
think of it from the perspective of if I was sitting in a movie theater in 1971 with John Lennon, Yoko Ono, and like these big fans that watched this movie like 20 times.
Right.
There's something here in that time period. People were looking for enlightenment. And a lot of times people were trying to like Western people were looking to the East for like their sort of philosophies to come and like infuse and have like a larger cultural discussion. So there's weight and importance to that. And Alejandro was in the right place at the right time
Yeah.
with the right amount of whatever they needed for this to spark and hit off. And so if I lived then from that perspective, I could potentially see how watching this movie at 1 in the morning and having not experienced the media literacy that we have now would have been like mind blowing.
Sure.
I wouldn't like it, but it would have been influential to me as a viewer. So, like Lynch has a perspective of being more accessible than Alejandro did, but he could see Alejandro's work and where it came from to make his own choices. So, the influence Alejandro's work had, I am thankful for it to exist and come out there. Otherwise, I wouldn't have David Lynch. I wouldn't have a bunch of other stuff. For El Topo, I won't watch it again unless
Right.
in like a decade we're doing this. It was, oh, let's go back and revisit it. Maybe then I would do it, but only if you suggested
Maybe.
it. But I wanted us to watch it and talk about it because I watched it for Haunted West and I remember vague notions about it, but I didn't have anyone to discuss it with. And so I wanted to
Sure.
be able to have a conversation about this thing to really break down my own thoughts and feelings about it. And it is, from a cinematic perspective, a spectacle that people should see.
Mhm.
If you care about plot or you're sensitive against the topics, you should definitely avoid it at all cost. It's not watchable. It is an
Right.
experience to be had. I would prefer to have the experience in a theater once
Yes.
and then be done with it than watching it at home where my kid's out for like snow breaks. I'm watching the movie like 10 minutes here, 15 minutes here. And then yesterday I had to like power watch the last 55 minutes of this film to get through it.
And, like, to your point, right, it's, like, very few of these I've been like, "Oh, this needs to be seen in the theater," but I would argue you're right, like, in a way, this does need to be seen in the theater because partially for just being able to turn to something and go, Did that fucking happen?" Right? Um, but also being in a dark place, being in a liminal space, not having the ability to stop it or pause it or rewind it, just letting it relentlessly go on and on and on and on and letting the images wash over you. I think that is important. But I mean, again, like some of this is, I wonder some of the pacing issues are because Alejandro still ultimately comes from a comic book background, right? Because in comic books, you can control pacings in a very different way than you can control in a film. Um, there's a small part of me, not a very strong part of me, that would like to see a version of this as a comic book because I feel like some of the pacing stuff would work better in a comic book.
Hmm.
Like you can almost see 3 volumes of comic, right, in this film.
Yeah.
But or even like a 3-part miniseries, like 3 episodes, And the movie kind of squints at that because there are title cards scattered throughout that kind of imply an episodic structure. Um, but yeah, no, otherwise I agree with you, right? Like this is um, in the same rough spaces like The Matrix, where people watch The Matrix and their minds got blown. You
Mm-hmm.
know, the difference being The Matrix is structurally a much better film. But I can still see, like, you're sitting in the dark and you're watching this thing and just making you think about things you haven't thought about before and going, oh my God, what about this? I could totally see people watching this and going, this is amazing, this is awesome. Well, what if religion really did suck? What if, what is the relationship between religion and violence? What is, the relationship between personal faith and institutional faith? I can totally see those being super cool conversations when you're a little bit high, 1 o'clock in the morning outside of a theater.
And likely one of the closest things people would have had such a push for them to think deeper would have potentially been like 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Right.
So I'm thinking about it from that time, from that perspective, which then I go on from how we talked about before. If Alejandro had been able to make Dune, it would have changed the entire course of science fiction completely.
Yeah.
Everything. I'm glad he didn't, because that would have been a mess to watch, and I would have done it.
Yes, it would have been a mess to watch, and I think honestly, science fiction probably would have stopped being viable as a medium probably about 10 years after that. If they're trying to chase Dune, that Dune specifically. Star Wars' ability to fuse action adventure with headier concepts is the right path for science fiction as a genre for pop culture.
When people tell you that like pop culture and like pop movies and things aren't the way to go, they're lying to you, because that is the only way you're going to get mass market media for a success, to make a bunch of money, to then have people be able to take that money and make smaller, more artistic projects and keep it going. You need
Right.
Star Wars to have other things.
Right. And somewhere like as much as people like to gripe about, well, Sinners isn't really, that great a vampire movie. The point is like, because it was pitched as, here's a vampire movie, Sinners now is, I think, what, the most Academy Awards ever for a movie or something like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Sorry, the nominations, most nominations for a movie.
Hoping they
so like
win.
but the point is like you
I'm
need
hoping
to have
more
those.
than the white people in that movie win, Eddie, like they did at
Yeah,
some other award shows, that they
I
then
know.
had them accept their awards off screen, because how can we show people this movie of black people and people of color of all different color backgrounds, and we give it to the white person? There you go.
Right, but and completely agree. But you need those metrics like this film got these number of nominations, this film made this much money to make more movies like that, right?
Correct.
So yes, El Topo might be this groundbreaking thing, but it very clearly did not have the cultural impact, and so it needed something like The
John
Matrix.
Lennon.
John Lennon. It needed other factors to get these ideas in front of people. So yes, underground media is important. We will always value and treasure it when it is good. But at the same time, you absolutely can't discount it has to be elevated to culture at some point in time to continuous progress.
All right, so I've made Eddie go on this huge surreal journey and everything else, and I knew that it would probably not win Eddie over, because it definitely didn't win me over. So instead, I decided to back up that play and go in the completely opposite direction for the next film. The next thing we're covering is Red Sun 1971. It stars Charles Bronson, and it is essentially cowboys versus samurai.
Woohoo! Now we're talking.
It's got Ursula Andrews in it, Eddie. Come on. Like,
excellent.
So that's what people can expect next time. And I hope Eddie will eventually forgive me for making him watch this film.
But not today.
Hey, if people want to support you because your friend makes you watch bad media, where can they do that?
If you want to support me, you need to back the Darker Hue Discord and rage give Chris money, and specifically when you give him money, tell him this is to pay for the therapy I have to go through, even though I have access to the NHS here, that I have to go through from watching this film. Because also sometimes Chris throws me some of that money, and that's always nice. But otherwise, you can find me at pugsteady.com, or you can buy my Funny Dog game, which has significantly less sexual assault in it, at realmsbugmeyer.com.
If you want to support me, you can do it at Darker Hue Studios website or the Discord. Above everything else, I appreciate all of y'all listening. And if you really want to support us, you could share more of our genreless episodes. Maybe not El Topo. Maybe share some of the other ones that you really like the Twin Peaks run or something else, to get us some more listeners.
Yes. Do it Twin Peaks again. That'd be awesome.
Don't
We'll see
tell
you
me.
next time.